It is my pleasure to introduce Diane Helentjaris. She's a freelance writer and photographer who often captures her love of the Blue Ridge Piedmont, its people and viewscapes in her writing and photography. Diane is a practiced writing coach and a member of the Hellenic Writers Group of Washington, D.C., James River Writers, Maryland Writers Association, Pennwriters, and Round Hill Writers Group. She served as a judge in the Pennwriters Annual Writing Competition and was a 2020 finalist in the Iceland Writers Retreat Alumni Award. Diane's award-winning photographs are exhibited nationally. Welcome back, Diane.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. So I'm happy to talk about writing articles. I think it's something for all writers to consider doing, and it's a lot of fun. So I want to get started. As Lorraine said, my first name is Diane, and my last name is Helentjaris. I know it's a long name, but that's what it is. And I live here in Loudoun County, and some of you are, I believe, out of state. So Loudoun is in Northern Virginia. It's about 35 miles from Washington, D.C., and it is right up against the Blue Ridge. It's a very beautiful place, and I've been here for 30 years, and I love it. So what I want to talk about as far as writing articles is what they are, why I think they're a good idea and you should consider them, how to get started, how to get organized, and as an added part, how to do your research from home. So the first thing is, what exactly do I mean when I talk about articles? An article, as I'm going to discuss it tonight, is not a fiction piece. It's not a poem. It could be a short article in a lifestyle magazine. It could be an opinion piece, an essay, an article in a newsletter, a how-to article, a historic piece. Generally, it's going to be nonfiction or opinion, and it's going to range from about 50 words to several thousand. So book reviews, I believe, not reader reviews like you would put on Amazon about how you like the book or your purchases, but rather like formal book reviews. I consider those covered under this discussion. So it's journalism light is one way to think of it. I'm not talking about investigative journalism. I'm talking about things that most of us could write. Okay, and why should you be writing articles? Well, writing articles gives you an opportunity to get out in the world. You know, I'm going to assume that most writers have a desire to write a book. They might be working on a book, planning a book, already published books, but a book is a large project which takes a lot of time, has a lot of steps. And while you're writing the book, you don't have as many opportunities to get your work known because it's not done yet. But if you write some articles along with writing your book, you can really test the waters and get out of the pack. So it advertises your work with what's called earned publicity versus purchased advertisement. Earned publicity is where on your own somebody decides that's a good story and pays attention to your work. It lets you explore people and ideas and places. I think it's less frustrating sometimes to write an article than to write a book. There's fewer steps, and it's just simpler. There's less drudgery. There's certain steps that When you write articles, you don't have to, you can skip. Like if you're writing a book, you may want to get an agent, and that could involve 70 emails. It could involve 6 months to a year getting an agent to sign on. And then at that point, you have to wait for the agent and work with them to get your book in shape and sell your book. When you write an article, you generally do not hire an editor. You don't hire a proofreader. You don't have to make a book cover, okay? The editing is limited, which generally you're going to be responsible for having your article be in good shape when you send it off to the publication. The editor may do some changes, or they may do a lot, but most of the time, most editors for publications expect you to have done the legwork. So which is what you should be doing when you're writing a book as well, turning in clean copy, but it means that you're not going to go out and go through like several revisions with a professional editor before it goes to publication. So there's some other things that you can skip when you're writing articles instead of books, and that means some of the publicity requirements for a book. You don't go on book tours, you don't go to book signings, and you really don't purchase advertisements. Any getting the word out usually is limited to maybe mentions in your social media accounts, and you leave the rest of the publicity to the publication. So that saves you a lot. Now, the other reason to write articles, or I consider it more a perk, okay, something nice, but nothing that you're going to live on, which is you can get paid. And you can get paid money that you can then use to supplement your book writing. If you're writing a book, your research trips, you can use that money to pay your professional memberships. You can buy printer ink with it, or whatever you want. Writing articles does not pay very much. So, and often when you're first getting started, you shouldn't expect to be paid at all. But it does kind of even things out a little bit. Now, what's nice about articles, another reason that I like to do them, is your problems are ephemeral and they're small because it's just an article. If you write an article and it totally bombs, you haven't invested as much time and energy and effort into it as you would have with larger projects, and you can learn and move on. And it's just part of the deal, you know? So the fact that you can recover from those is great, you know? And I think sometimes when you're working on a larger project, you can go down one path and you're not really sure, you know, whether this is going to appeal to your target audience or exactly who your target audience is. Whereas if you're writing a series of articles, you can hone in on who exactly likes your style of writing, the subjects you write about, who's on your in your tribe or on your team. And you have a better sense of what they expect and what they want, and you can meet your customers' desires that way. So I really enjoy the articles because it does enrich your skill levels. As I said, you can earn a little income. It's a low risk opportunity to develop your skills. You know, you can, all the activities that you do when you're writing articles are the same activities you're going to do with any project, any writing project. And so you're honing your skills, you're getting your writing down better, you learn how to manage your time, you learn the market, you learn how to interact with editors, how to meet their needs, and have a satisfactory relationship. Writing articles also gives you a chance to experiment and try new ideas. Now, one thing that I like about writing articles is, now you don't have to, you could spend your whole writing career and be an article writer, and that's what you do. You do short pieces, you do nonfiction, you do lifestyle. You don't want to write a book, you don't do any poems, you do no fiction, and you're happy. On the other hand, if you're writing a book, as you well know, you're going to come across research, you're going to spend a lot of time getting to learn your subject, and yet you don't use all that knowledge. Well, you can spin off part of what you've learned in researching your book into shorter pieces. And what I'm going to do today is talk about some of the ways that I've done it and that I've found helpful. So right now I'm working on a book. I have like several projects that I expect to finish. And the one that is probably going to get done first as far as a large project is a book that's a biography about a woman who rode in the Wild West shows in the early 1900s. And when I'm researching this, you find out these kind of oddball situations. And the one thing that struck me was the newspapers covered an event in 1913. And basically, Pawnee Bill's Wild West show had collaborated with Buffalo Bill Cody's and joined together in an effort to keep Buffalo Bill from going under. He wasn't very good at managing his business affairs. And so the two Bills, as they called themselves, this is a poster from just Pawnee Bill's show, were touring, and they were in Madison Square Garden, and they're having a dinner one night. And the New York Times kindly described what they ate. They had lima beans, they had cabbage, they had rice pudding, and they're sitting there in some big institutional type dining hall. And most of the cowboys had already left when a flock of suffragettes came in, because 1913 women did not have the vote. And the suffragettes were planning an enormous parade in a few days in Manhattan. And in order to gin up interest and get a little excitement, they asked the two Bills if they could borrow some cowgirls. And the two Bills agreed, and they included, they said they wanted some of the Native Americans to go with them. So a group of 5 cowgirls, including the woman I'm writing about, and 5 American Indians, they were, I believe, mostly Sioux, agreed to march in the suffrage parade. And so I was struck by that and the collaboration of these disparate groups to work together on a common goal. And so what I did with that research, and here's a picture of the woman I'm writing about. She's on the broncho. And her name was Lulabelle Parr. And there's a picture of the suffrage parade. And as you can tell, those aren't exactly cowgirls. They look much more staid and just not from the same background at all. So I wrote a letter to the editor, an opinion piece, using that research, and detailed what had happened and my opinion as to why that was something that maybe these days, when everyone tends to talk more about how we're different than how we're alike, and how we don't work together for common goals, how maybe we should go back and be more like the cowgirls and the suffragettes. So I sent that letter to the editor, to the New York Times. They did not publish it. But I also sent it to the Cheyenne, Wyoming newspaper, and they did. Now, the thing that was nice about that was then I went to the Buffalo Bill Cody Museum scholar, and he really had not heard of this incident. So now I have a relationship that's a little stronger with the Buffalo Bill Cody Museum, and that is a resource for me as I go on and develop my book. So you can see that articles, these short pieces, can supplement and enhance what you're doing with your larger projects. And you can do the same thing with a fiction piece. Let's say you're writing a modern day novel or a YA book about marginalized teens. And as you're writing that, you probably get to thinking, or you might already have an opinion that you'd like to express both in the book, but maybe also in an opinion piece for the paper or in an essay. So these short pieces can really help you spread the word and your views. Now, how to get started writing articles. If you want to write, like, let's say, and this is something that sometimes people like, well, I want to do something different, how do I actually get started? I don't know. There's not books. There's not really a course on, a degree or a certification in how to write articles. At least I'm not aware of any. So this is how I would suggest you do it. First thing, usually, is to pick your topic. This is a view from the room where I write. It's the room where I am now, and it's really beautiful in all seasons. And what you see here are mostly trees, okay? You can't really tell, but in the winter, what I see is this 19th century mansion, Paxton. It's in Leesburg. It's on 16 acres. And I've lived in Leesburg about 30 years, and I always heard about Paxton or Exeter, Carlheim. Carlheim is the formal name of the building. And I heard rumors, and I heard folk tales. I heard ghost stories about the place. And I wanted to know more, I heard, I was curious because the owners, when they passed away, had deeded the property for the benefit of children. And you have to wonder, why did that happen? Why would they want their property to go to the welfare of children? I also heard a ghost story about some lonely woman up in a tower, and I was sure it was about Carlheim. So for me, when I have questions like that, I'm going to use that and try to turn it into an article. And I did. As far as Carlheim, I did a fair amount of research, and I found out why the lady who was the final owner of this property, and actually had been built for her, decided to honor children when she passed on. So that was one thing, and I would encourage you, when you're looking for a topic, not to be intimidated. I think sometimes folks think that they should only write about things that they totally understand and totally know, and I don't believe that's true. You don't want to be Captain Obvious. You don't want to write an article that gives no new information to the reader. So you're going to have to go out there and think of yourself as the agent for the reader, for your customer, in finding information that they want to know about or that they need to know about. And so to do that, you don't have to know everything. You just have to find out information and learn it, and then write it in a coherent way that's clear. So it's my Carlheim, and as I said, here's a picture of the mansion close up with the school bus coming to take the kids away. It has various services now on the campus for youth programs. So what would you like to know about? That should be one of the best places to start in picking your topics for writing your articles. Now, another subset of this is my recommendation to begin with what you do know something about and something that you like. I like to bake. Those are my media noches rolls. I think they're Cuban. They're like for midnight snacks, okay? And it's fun to bake those. So when I was looking for article topics for a lifestyle magazine, I thought, well, baking's good, you know. I'd like to know more about baking. And I wonder if there's a cooking school in Loudoun County. So in my article on cooking schools in Loudoun, and there were some, and they were all very different, I found a woman who gave courses in how to make French baguettes. She had gone to Vermont. She had studied at King Arthur Flour, I believe it is, for days, and gave a very rigorous course on how to make baguettes, how to make other baked goods, and it was fascinating. So for me, starting with what I knew a little bit about helped me find that topic. Gardening, maybe you're a gardener. I'm not much of a gardener, but I was assigned an article on the master gardeners. Well, it turns out my neighbor at the time was a master gardener. So if you have friends who know more than you do, they can help you a lot with your articles. This lady is obviously shy. She was camera shy, but she gave good background information and was very helpful with my article about the master gardeners. In my writing, my friends, my families, my neighbors, my coworkers, no one is off limits. This is my stepfather. He was 90 years old in this picture. And I was doing some writing about flour sacks. In the Depression, the cotton bags that they stored flour in were printed as like a customer service or an advertising niche with patterns. And people would cut these flour sacks up and use them for clothing and curtains and toys, all kinds of things. So of course, my stepdad, he had his flour sack. He grew up in the Depression. He still had one in case he needed one. So he was kind enough to share it and, of course, to let me take his picture. So you can tap your friends and neighbors, find out what they're doing, or you should already know a little bit. You know, maybe you're out going to the vegetable market and you see this gigantic pumpkin. I did, and I had to wonder, you know. So there were things to learn. Now, they did get me started. They did post the poundage. It was over 1,800 pounds, but there's a lot I'd like to know about growing giant pumpkins, so that could be a future story. My recommendation when you're first getting started is that you start near your home. That's for several reasons. It's a lot easier to interview people when they're nearby. You save your travel cost if you ever had to travel, and you should probably know more about what's near you. Now, the first magazine article that I was assigned began as a result of photos that I took in Loudoun County. I take a lot of photos here locally and I exhibit them pretty regularly, and someone knew about my photos and they were starting a new magazine, and so they asked me to illustrate one of their stories. And then eventually I I started writing and illustrating because I like doing both activities. Now this is some sheep. They belong to Linda, who runs a grocery store in Waterford, and they're right behind the store. And I really like this picture. Okay, so let's say you've got your topic and you need to get organized now as to what you do next. So you're going to have to find a publication. Now, some people will find publications first that they want to write for it and then use that as a way to dream up topics. But either way, you're going to find yourself investigating a publication. The way I like to do it is go online and look through their website if they have a website, or have a copy of what they produce if they do something that's real, like a magazine or a newsletter that you can hold in your hand, and read it and look for the masthead. And at the masthead, they often will put, if you want to write for us, and they'll give you a link or submission information, and that's a good way to find out what they want and what they expect. You can also go on submittable.com and find folks that are looking for submissions. Now, an important thing to remember or to pay attention to is when you're going to write for a magazine, you really should read it before you submit an idea to make sure it's a good fit. Some publications may be restricted into their audience. They may actually restrict who can submit to them by age. I've seen that, or at least by their target. It might not be a good fit for you. So you want to look through and see if that's the type of articles that you're going to be interested in writing. So you want to time your queries, or certainly pay attention. Now this was one of the fastest query acceptances I've had. I had an idea to write an article about Middleway, West Virginia. Middleway was the site of an exorcism in the 1700s, and as a result, the person who received the exorcism donated property to the Catholic Church, and to this day, the Catholic Church owns it. And at the time of my query, they had what would it be? The kind of place that you go away and do, I'm blocking out the name, a retreat, okay? So they had a retreat there. And I thought that was really interesting. And they actually call the town Wizard's Cliff sometimes in reference to the bedevilment that the poor man who needed the exorcism had undergone. Well, it was in October, and I thought, well, this is a good subject for Halloween, although I knew I was pushing it time-wise. So I sent a query to a publication, Religion Unplugged, and they responded in 4 hours and said, yes, we want it. And I had a few days and I wrote it and had a lot of fun doing it. So you want to time your queries, because most of the time the seasons are off cycle. So that can be a real problem if you need illustrations and you have to provide them, and you're looking for winter scenes for a Christmas article, but you're thinking about it in July, okay? Because most of the time, people do their seasonal stuff like maybe 6 months ahead, or it takes, a month or 2 or 3 before you can go through the cycle of having your query, having it accepted, writing the article, having it, and then having it printed. So you want to be thinking of things usually, unlike the Priestfield article, not days ahead of time, but months ahead of time. Usually, when I write an article, ideally, I like to give myself a break, and I prefer having about a month to do an article if I can, because that way it's not rushed. But when you're setting things up, like let's say you've got your topic, you've queried it, somebody wants you to write this article, how do you set up those activities connected with writing? And you prioritize the least controllable things first. And in writing, those tend to be weather related, schedule related, and interviews. Okay. So this picture is from a story I did on hot air ballooning in the Blue Ridge area. And to schedule the pictures, which I have wonderful pictures, and I was really happy with them. But I started a couple months ahead of time, and the owner of the company told me that I should watch the weather, and it would have to be certain conditions, quiet air, certain temperatures, clear, all that sort of stuff. And as it turned out, I identified a window in July, I think it was around the 4th of July or something, and the weather was satisfactory, and I was able to do this. But if the snow looks beautiful at the place that you want to photograph, you're going to have to go when the snow's there. Or if you're doing interviews, you're going to want to call ahead and give yourself a lot of time, because people have other things to do. The other reason to do your interviews early and get them out of the way, your initial interviews, is because interviews beget other interviews. So this is from a story that I was doing on art quilts. And I'm interviewing one person I knew about, one artist, and of course they said, oh no, you have to talk to Kathy Ratliff of Nine Patch Studio, because she is a true artist, and she's over in Waterford and blah, blah, blah. So I did, and that person was right, and Kathy does wonderful work. But if I had, and here's examples, those quilts are like 8 by 8, 10 by 10 inches, and they're just exquisite. But if I had waited on the interview until too close to my deadline, I would not have had time for Kathy, and I would not have been able to include her work in my story. So you want to do it early. Yeah. The other reason is interviews also, they not only beget other interviews, they beget other articles. So, and just really enrich your abilities. So my son likes to take ceramics, and he takes them from, he has taken them in the past from Amy Manson of the Clay and Metal Loft in Leesburg. So I did an article about Amy, and Amy said, oh, you need to meet my mentor, Bill Van Gilder. He's in Maryland, and he's coming to my shop. And so from that, I was able to do a really nice article on mentoring, and it was a lot of fun. So now the way you're going to get this thing started with your editors and with the publications is with an email query. Unless you happen to meet somebody in person, although rarely now do we rub as many elbows as we used to. But usually you're going to end up identifying your topic, identifying your publication, and then emailing the editor or the person assigned to accept queries. There are things you can do that make it more likely to have your query accepted. An important thing is to remember that editors and people in publications are inundated with words all day, emails, things to read, things to look at, things to sort through. So you want to make it easy for them. And my recommendation is that when you send an email query, you label that email query so that the person reading it knows exactly what it is, and that you put something about what the idea is. The reason for that is, like, later, you know, they might store that email and then they're like, who sent me that email about whale watching? You know, well, if you put it in the subject line, they'll be able to follow it and find it. The other thing is I recommend that at the bottom of your message should be short. It should be a good example of your writing skills, you know, like at least proofread it, make sure your grammar and your spelling are correct, and make it interesting but brief. And when you sign it, then put one of those, I think they're called address blocks, that's your name and your website, if you have a website, and your phone number. Now, you may or may not want to put your physical address. I tend to do that in the hopes of looking credible, you know, like if I'm going to communicate with somebody, I'm going to be willing to share my address so that they know exactly where I am, and they can look on my website and get a sense of what I do. If you don't have a website, you might include, but you're on social media, your social media handles, so that they can look and see, you know, what kind of things you do and what you're about. Now, if you get an editor who wants to work with you, especially if they want to work with you on an ongoing basis, I would recommend that you meet with them if you can, either virtually or in person, so that you can talk about, or at least on the phone, and talk about what their goals are for their publication, who their target audience is, what kind of things they've already done to death, you know, so that you don't waste your time submitting those sort of ideas, and what sort of things they'd like to do in the future. And that'll help you develop a good relationship. The goal for writing articles, in my mind, is mastering your submission processes and learning to create really clean copy and how to meet deadlines. You might consider that you start with a low word count. For instance, History Magazine, their typical article is 2,000 words, but on their website they suggest, and I'm going to read this, if you want to write for History Magazine, why not try submitting a trivia piece first? We always want good trivia items. And those are about 450 to 500 words. And we welcome your proposals on ideas. So it's a way for them to try you out, and you get to try them out. Other approaches for starting to write these things are to co-write it, get a buddy, split up the work, you both get credit. You may just do the research and the formatting, but you'll still get credit as a co-author. You want to avoid premature entanglements. And what I mean here is maybe hold off on committing yourself to a monthly anything until you kind of check out which kind of articles you like the best, and what really appeals, and what you get the biggest bang for your buck. Now, when you've got a few under your belt and you want to do more, you can use references like Writers Marketplace or Submittable to find additional markets for your work. You can also, there's a blog called Make a Living Writing that is very helpful. Hopefully you've already joined a writer's week, but if not, I would suggest you do. Now, when you're doing articles, government contacts are a little different. They can take longer. So just as you want to get your interviews done early, any of your government needs, you probably want to try to get those rolling early on. Often government entities work with public relations officers, and rather than having you directly contact an individual employee or government official. They also might have restrictions as to access to different services, like you might not be able to go right to like the youth center because of privacy needs. So it's really good to build in some extra time. But having said that, this is a picture of Gary Clemens, our clerk of the court here in Loudoun. They have unique resources that you can't get other places, and they are very credible resources. So here in Loudoun, we have court records that go back to the 1700s. We're one of the few places in the country that do, and the clerk works really diligently to have opportunities for people to access that information. You want to maximize your writing conditions. This is just a general writing thing. You know, if you need a cookie to write, have a cookie. Or if you write in certain particular times of day work best for you, then set up your schedule so that those are available for you to spend on your writing. All right, so once you get going and you're actually pulling all this stuff together and putting together a document, you're going to have bits and pieces to keep track of. You might, some people still are old school. They put it in a binder, they put it in cardboard files or in a box. There's are always probably some reference materials that you're going to have to physically keep. Most go totally online. And there are software packages and organizations, often free, that can help you keep track of your material. Trello is like an online bulletin board. They have a free version. Scrivener is not very expensive and gives you lots of options for keeping your material in order and generating your work. The goal is going to be a finished piece, and sometimes the publication will let you know how they want it put together. Most of the time, they leave it up to you. Generally, my recommendation is that you do a document that is 12 font times New Roman, double spaced, has a title and a subtitle. The title and subtitle are critical in that they're going to be what draws the reader to your article. So you want to have it be specific enough that people are drawn to it and know what they're going to get. And also, ideally, have it be something that's friendly for search engine optimization, SEOs, okay? So if you're doing an article about sourdough bread, you wouldn't want to have your title be baked goods, because baked goods is so general, people will just skim right over it. But if you have sourdough bread in your title, you're going to draw in the sourdough bread people. So you want to be specific and pithy, okay? The other thing I like to do on my document is have a header, a three-part header at the top. And on the header, I put my name, the name of the publication, and the title of the article. And that helps me keep track of it. I think it might help other people who read it keep track of it. I also insert page numbers always. anything that helps clarify what you're doing. Particularly for articles are the idea of sidebars. And sidebars are those little insets in a magazine article that might have the contact information for an organization or a subsidiary story. So for instance, when I was doing an article about records at the court and Gary Clemens, I put a sidebar in about a prior clerk of court who I believe was in the Revolutionary War, was responsible for all the records in the county, the legal records, and he loaded them up in a cart and took them off down in, I believe it was, they think it was in the Shenandoah Valley. And the records stayed out of Loudoun for like 3 years, which was good because, you know, they were burning the, well, they weren't, I'm sorry, I was getting my wars mixed up. But, you know, it kept those records and we still have them. So that was my sidebar. Editors like sidebars because they break up the space. As you probably know, people are reading shorter versions of everything now. They like shorter paragraphs. Their eyes are like constantly in motion when they're reading. And so a sidebar helps break up the space and gives a little variety. So if you include a sidebar, what you do is you write your article, and at the bottom, I always just labeled it optional sidebar. And then the editor had it if they wanted it. Oh, that after you write your article and you have it all formatted and you think it's done, your draft, then let it sit. And that's just a general writer's recommendation. Let it sit, and then come back to it because you will see any issues that you might have missed. You know, we get all excited. We're so happy that we're done that we sometimes can rush and hit the send button. Now, if you send an article to your editor, and this has happened to me, the minute you send it, you look and you go, oh no, there was an error, okay? Some type of typo or factoid error. Just correct it and be honest, and as soon as you can, send the corrected copy. And you can label it, again, in the subject line, corrected version. The other thing to do when you're sending your articles to your editors is send it as an attachment, but also include it in the body. And the reason you include it in the body of the email is it makes it easy to read if people are out and about and they can't open an attachment. And that can really help. You want to learn the bells and whistles on your computer, take advantage of them. I like to use my computer when I read my work out loud and let the computer read it to me. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about ways to research from home. I like researching from home. It wasn't always possible, but now that everything's digitized, we can just get so much information. The Library of Congress is one that you want to know about as far as a resource. Those are free, they're copyright free. They have maps, documents, papers, but they also have a newspaper collection called Chronicling America that has a very robust newspaper search function. So the address is just www.loc.gov, and they give frequent, if you get on their mailing list, they give tutorials all the time on how to access their records. There's other stashes of information that you can research from home that I think are kind of surprising. Prison records. You can find prison records from the 1800s, and it's not that hard. A lot of the old early prisons, they might be museums now, or they have gift shops and you can contact them. And this is a picture. I've researched a story about a kidnapping in I believe it was 1890. And the kidnappers, before they were kidnappers, were horse thieves and were imprisoned. And son of a gun, you can get their intake record from the Colorado State Prison that tells you how tall they were, what their scars were. It was a man and a woman. Whether they had religion, and these guys did not, if they had children, where their kids were, just all from an intake record. So you might not have thought of that, but prison records can be interesting. As far as credible records, I particularly like to use PhD and master's thesis because people typically do a deep dive when they're working on their master's and their PhD and can pull together all kinds of info. And I find these online, just looking, searching under different topics, they'll show up, but I wouldn't hesitate to look through those to take the time. I usually, when I start researching at home on a topic, I'll start with Wikipedia, okay? I know it's not the most highly regarded source of information, but it does give you a general sense of what the public has in their knowledge base. And more importantly, it will often give you a list of original references at the bottom, and many of those are available electronically. A lot of things have been digitalized, and a lot of groups are doing it. It saves them money. It makes things more accessible. It's just the way to go. This is from a book that I'm planning on starting in the future about a woman who was a madam in St. Joseph, Missouri. And she had her daughter married Chick Scoggins, who played in an orchestra. He led an orchestra. So that's Chick over there. And this was available through the University of Missouri digital records. In researching, I also use online auctions like eBay, especially ephemera. Ephemera might be pamphlets, maps, little small things. You can sometimes just buy them for not very much money. I might have spent like $10 on this newspaper print. It's a St. Joseph, Missouri courthouse. I believe it's St. Joseph, yes. And the interesting thing is, not only would this serve as a good illustration, it's beyond the date where I have to worry about copyright, but also it gives you information because it talks about the cost, which wasn't available in other places. So online auctions can be good. They can give you, as I said, in that past print, copyright-free images. So postcards, if they're old enough, are copyright-free. So you want to read up on that and consider using them both as information for you, so you can kind of see, if you're doing a historic piece, what things were like back in the day, but also they can serve as kind of cute illustrations. Ephemera. Now, online auctions can also be large auction houses. They'll have catalogs. You can look through and get a sense of what life was like at certain times. This is a map of Aosta, Italy. I think it's around 1903. So if you were writing, like, let's say, a historic novel about Aosta, Italy, you could find out, how the roads all connected. I wouldn't hesitate to use foreign language resources. And the quick and dirty thing to do is use Google Translate, get a general idea about what the information is, and then later get it formally translated. I did find in an online digital newspaper, for instance, information printed in a Swedish language newspaper in Denver, Colorado in 1890, I think. And I used Google Translate because it was the only reference I had to this event. It was just a paragraph, but I got the gist. And then I had a friend who was Norwegian who had a Swedish friend, you know, and it went like that. And they translated it for me. So I wouldn't hesitate, you know, don't be too intimidated by things in other languages. Court transcripts. This is the madam, her family in Kentucky, the siblings. She's not in this. I think she was non gratis at the time. Sued each other. Well, they actually sued their brother's widow over land, the family farm. They had found oil there. Well, the good thing about that is, even though it was in 1913, the court records, they had a transcript. They had a 400-page transcript, which wasn't too expensive. I purchased photocopies from the Kentucky court system, and it was all of these people talking. You could get a sense of what their language was like, how they felt about each other. It was just invaluable. And so I wouldn't, on the face of it, necessarily have thought that there would be court transcripts. Now, this I did totally from home, and you can do that too. You want to pick up the phone and not hesitate to do that. You can develop relationships with people from pretty far away. This is some artwork for an article about recycling and upcycling as an art form. And this man, Mark Langan in Cleveland, created this from cardboard. And so I found him online, and I just called him up, and he was happy to be interviewed and give me his information and his feelings about why he did it, and share his illustrations. Librarians. We're running out of time, so I just want to say librarians can be your best friend. Most libraries have reference librarians. They will help you get books through interoffice loans. They will help you identify articles on your topics. And I've even had librarians put together a list of potential references for me once they knew what my topics were. So they are just invaluable. This is the Thomas Balch. It's a history library in Leesburg. That's the director, Alexander Grissett. This is, I did borrow a bunch of books through the Interlibrary Loans, and this is some material from them. Don't forget, little museums can have lots of information. The African American Historical Association of Fauquier County is in, I think it's 4,200 square feet. It's very small, but they have digitized 12 different data sets and just a wealth of information. And that's the founder, Karen Hughes White. They have wonderful photographs of the African American community and Fauquier, all kinds of stuff. Books, as far as using books as a reference, writing articles opens doors. That's true. I want to just mention that many books now are available online, so you don't necessarily have to buy them. You just have to know to look for the online version, which is often free. These are especially true in older textbooks. What I often do is, if I have a free online copy, I'll load it onto my e-reader, use it as a reference, and if it turns out I'm just using it so much I want to have a copy, then I buy a copy. And I don't hesitate to buy used copies, but you can do a lot of your research from home. And this is my website, which is just my name. You can contact me through my website, and you can also look, I have writing resources posted on my website, and I'll be putting some specific to this talk up in the next couple days. I already have some up. You can look and find some of these resources I talked about, and I'm happy to answer any questions.